deep freeze where piles upon piles of snow built up and compressed to form thick sheets of ice. But John England, the scientist I spent time with on Banks, is convinced that the island was thinly covered in ice toward the end of the last ice age. When that thin veil of ice pulled back and slowly wasted away, it left behind hundreds of tundra ponds, polygons, and stream beds where water flowed and where swaths of mosses, sedges, dwarf willow, and other Arctic plants grew and slowly decayed into thick layers of peat. Decomposition could not keep up with the living things that grew so well in a part of the Arctic that is warmed, at times, by a massive wind-driven gyre that regulates climate and sea ice formation. There are other places in the archipelago where there are verdant peatland meadows. The Kajua and Nanook River valleys on Victoria Island, southeast of Banks, which I have canoed through, Sverdrup Pass, the Fosheim Peninsula, and Strathcona Fjord on Ellesmere Island in the most northerly parts of the Arctic, are others I have hiked and excavated with paleontologists. The approach to Bylot Island by sailboat in the eastern Arctic was memorable for so many geese nesting among predatory Arctic foxes and red foxes that recently arrived from the mainland. But one has to go much farther south to see an expanse of peat as vast as this in the high Arctic, and as many birds, plants, and animals as there are here. As much as I thought of writing a book on peat following my explorations of Banks Island, there was much more to be learned before I got up the gumption to begin putting pen to paper. These peaty landscapes in the circumpolar Arctic, the boreal forest, the Atlantic cedar swamps, mountains and deserts, and the tropical and temperate forest of the world do not lend themselves to more conventional descriptions, quite like alpenglow lighting up mountain vistas, the ripple and splashes of water echoing through grand canyons, lightning flickering across big prairie skies, and cacti flowering along ephemeral streams that wind their way through the sunburnt cliffs of deserts. Peatlands are difficult to assimilate because they are ambiguous, elusive, dangerous, sublime, and, as a Red River settler once said, deceitful. Not land or water, but water and land sharing dominance, like the marginal world of a tidal zone, albeit more slowly, less predictably, and sometimes violently. The eureka moment came on a 66-day, mostly solo kayak trip I did from Virginia Falls on the Nahanni River through some of the 82 peatlands along the Liard and the Mackenzie, the second longest river on the continent. I was 3/4 of the way along the Mackenzie when my water filter failed me. The constant rain and snow had passed by then, mercifully, but the enervating heat of the 22-hour-long Arctic days was withering. The river water was so silty that letting it sit overnight was not sufficient to provide me with anything close to a clean drink in the morning, or for the remainder of the day. With no trees to shade me, I was badly burned by the sun, and so dehydrated that I was on the verge of hallucinating, when the river was about to narrow from more than a mile wide to no more than 100 yards wide, where it squeezes through a rampart. And, just then, I saw a stream flowing down a hill, sparkling in the sunlight. The adrenaline returned, and I came back to my senses. The water turned out to be wonderfully clear and cold, but curiously sweet and smelling of smoke. The stream led me up that hill into a vast, endless wetland that had recently been burned along the edges by wildfire. The peaty flavor and smokiness of that water, I realized, was like the flask of peaty whiskey I had brought along and had long ago dispatched. I recognized some of the plants, like Labrador tea, blueberry, and the carnivorous sundew. There were many others, like a very late-blooming dragon's mouth orchid, Arethusa bulbosa, or possibly a more common calypso, that didn't seem to belong this far north. What little I knew about bryology, the study of ancient rootless plants such as mosses, liverworts, and hornworts that colonize nutrient-poor soils, was not enough for me to make sense of their